Episode 646. How did deception get behind her? Gold Incense didn't have to think hard. It was obviously shadow clone technique. But the remarkable thing was that deception had used shadow clone technique right under her nose, and Jin Shang hadn't noticed a thing. Every skill has a tell. When shadow clone jutsu is activated, the user's form flickers, just slightly. Everyone knew ninjas had that trick up their sleeve, so they were on guard from the start, and yet Jin Shang still fell for it. Because deception's movements were fast enough, and the faster the execution, the shorter the tell, there was no limit to how short it could get. Jin Shang had been closed in on. For a launcher player, this was extremely bad news. But Jin Shang wasn't too panicked, because this time she wasn't fighting alone. The character spun around and swung out a sweeping strike, a launcher's aerial skill. But deception had already retreated. The throat slash was just a secondary strike. His real goal was to break through and escape. If that failed, then he'd fight to the death. Deception stepped back from Jin Shang, then turned and leaped, twisting midair in an attempt to sail over the two players blocking his path. He just hoped those two wouldn't react too quickly. The two players blocking the way were a sharpshooter and a blade master. But to Deception's disappointment, both of them reacted with uncommon speed. The blade master leaped into the air and executed a falling phoenix slash, aiming directly at Deception as he tried to vault over their heads. Deception had no choice. In an instant, he executed another parry, his Rindao sweeping out to meet the falling phoenix strike's sword light. Parrying is just a collision of attacks permitted by the system. It's not a defensive skill. Attack collision that comes down to the judgment call. Deception's attack was just a normal strike, but the blade master had used falling phoenix slash. The sword light met his blade, but it only blocked part of the damage. It did nothing to stop the falling phoenix slash's momentum. The sword light continued its rapid descent. Deception braced his blade before him, but was helplessly knocked downward. This is the difference between parrying and blocking with a skill. A block skill can completely negate the opponent's attack judgment, while a parry only cancels out part of the damage, forcing you to take the full force of the attack's judgment. Deception was struck down by that falling phoenix slash, crashing to the ground. Meanwhile, the sharpshooter, as the blade master leaped, rolled backward, a move that left Deception deeply frustrated. The moment he landed, even if he immediately rolled forward to dodge the blade master, he would still end up right in the sharpshooter's crosshairs. These two were clearly seasoned veterans. Their coordinated advance and retreat had neutralized every possible move Deception could make. On both sides, the other players were already closing in, while the outer ring kept people in reserve. They hadn't let their guard down against the shadow clone technique at all. This is getting troublesome. The moment he hit the ground, Deception understood. No sooner had his character landed than he flipped backward. Behind him stood the opposing leader, Jin Shang. Jin Shang was a launcher, after all. Seeing Deception rolling toward her again, her instinct was to backstep. But then, as Deception flipped backward, it was like he dove into water. He simply vanished.
No.
The thought had barely crossed Jin Shang's mind when Deception burst up from the ground, right beneath her feet. This was the ninja art Earth Heart Decapitation. Another spray of blood erupted from Jin Shang's body, but the attack wasn't over yet. Deception, airborne after the Earth Core Decapitation, whipped his hands in a frantic dance before his chest, a hand seal taking shape.
This is...
Jin Shang, having raised her perspective, could see clearly, but she couldn't identify this hand seal at all. The hand seal was completed in an instant. Deception's figure suddenly flickered, as if about to perform a shadow clone technique, just a flicker. But this one move had a much wider range than the shadow clone technique. That single sway seemed to reach out in every direction at once. Jin Shang instantly knew what was coming next. Too bad that was all she could do, just know. Deception's figure flickered once, then scattered. Suddenly, the entire field was filled with countless copies of Deception, gray silhouettes darting wildly in a maddening blur. Blood blossoms began to burst across Jin Shang's body. This was the ninja's level 70 ultimate skill, ninja art shadow dance.
Spread out more. Watch out for him leaving the circle.
Jin Shang quickly issued the order. The shadow dance attack controlled multiple shadow clones, and after the move ended, the player could freely choose the character's landing position. With so many shadow clones creating overwhelming confusion, it was nearly impossible for anyone watching to predict where the final landing would be. If they didn't widen their defensive perimeter, there was a real chance this guy would use that move to slip out of the encirclement. The players followed the order, widening their circle as they launched attacks at the shadow clones. Shadow Dance's clones, like Shadow Clone Jutsu's clones, can be eliminated through attacks. The difference was that Shadow Dance's clones could move, and they were much tougher to kill. Everyone instinctively looked for the stationary clones to take out first. After all, during Shadow Dance, each clone required the player's manual control, so most of the time they couldn't fully manage every single one. Some would just stand there, frozen in place. Yet this time, after sweeping the area, they realized with a shock there were none. Not a single stationary shadow clone remained. Deception. He could actually control every single shadow clone. This move had definitely reached the professional standard of a ninja. Even the veteran players of the Jia Dynasty Guild, who had seen it all, had never encountered anyone in the arena who could control a shadow dance to this degree. With no shadow clones staying still, everyone just swung wildly at the moving ones. But the shadow clones from the shadow dance were under a skill effect, moving twice as fast as normal. The countless afterimages scattered across the field, their vision nearly burning with lingering traces. Yet still, they couldn't track a single one clearly. Still, skills have a cooldown. Let him have his moment. He's not getting away anyway. The side with superior numbers naturally had no fear. At first, Jin Shang thought the same, but before long she suddenly realized something was off. Her health was dropping far too fast. The skill Shadow Dance was usually treated as an AoE, but this time, Deception seemed to have focused all its attacks on Jin Shang alone. The gray phantom flickered wildly, confusing everyone's line of sight while relentlessly hammering its strikes onto her. Since Glory's skills are highly technical, their effects can sometimes be hard to pin down. Using Shadow Dance as an area of effect skill is simpler and easier to pick up, but focusing all that fire on a single target is also possible. It just requires a lot more tedious micromanagement. And that was exactly what Deception was doing. Controlling every shadow clone, he focused all their fire on Golden Fragrance. The concentrated assault was so overwhelming that her health bar plummeted. For the first time, a worry she'd never had before surfaced in her mind.
Am I going to die?
Jin Shang was so startled she forgot all propriety and shouted at the top of her lungs.
A cleric.
A full 15-man team. Of course they brought a cleric. The other players honestly hadn't noticed Jin Shang's condition. It was only when they heard her call for the cleric that they suddenly realized how much of her health had already dropped. The cleric rushed over and began casting, but a gray blur streaked past him, and with a single strike, his chant was violently interrupted.
Use instant casts.
Jin Shang was absolutely livid.